Hey, Rob here for QuadraTech. If you're looking to take the audio system in your Wrangler to the next level, but you don't want to give up the entire cargo area in the back of your Jeep for a huge speaker box with subwoofers, amplifiers, and complicated wiring, then you need to take a look at the Rockford Fosgate all-in-one audio kit. Featuring 1,800 watts of power, this system delivers clean, crisp highs and deep dynamic bass that's sure to provide you with endless enjoyment anytime you find yourself behind the wheel of your Wrangler. Whether that means you're cruising down the highway with the top closed, or maybe in the summertime with the top back and the doors off, this system is sure to deliver plenty of power so that you can always hear your music. I was really excited and impressed to check out this kit at the 2023 SEMA show in Las Vegas, and even more so that at the time Rockford Fosgate was basically production ready with this complete audio upgrade. Many times over we see new products at the SEMA show, but then it can take a little while before they actually make their way to market. This kit is designed to fit the 18 to 23 four-door Jeep Wrangler JL. It is compatible with both the base and the premium audio system from the factory. However, there are some limitations with different models. If you want to check out the full range of compatibility for the all-in-one audio kit, you can head over to quadratech.com. Now, I do also want to take this time to mention that Rockford Fosgate also has a very similar kit compatible with the 18 to 23 Jeep Gladiator, and you can check out more on that kit by watching that video by clicking the info button. That kit does share a lot of the same components as you see here, with a few minor differences to make it compatible with the Gladiator platform. Now, if we start by taking a look at what you get in this kit, you'll see absolutely everything comes out of one box to give you a complete, easy to install kit without any custom cutting, splicing, or custom wiring needed. You'll notice that everything features an OEM level fit and finish, so that once you're finished with your installation, all of the different components are gonna look like they were meant to be there right from the factory. Rockford Fosgate knows that, of course, the doors and the top of your Wrangler are removable, so everything is also weather resistant, so you don't have to worry about ruining anything if you should get caught in an occasional shower. You'll see that you get two 12-inch slim subwoofers in custom enclosures that are designed to fit on either side of the cargo compartment in the back of your Wrangler. We're also going to get two 1-inch tweeters to replace the tweeters found on the top of your dash, two 6.5-inch component speakers to replace those speakers found lower on the dash on the driver and passenger side. You're also going to see a complete replacement soundbar. We're not simply replacing the speakers in the soundbar. Rockford Fosgate has designed a complete replacement that's custom tuned to maximize the efficiency of the speakers in that soundbar. Now, in addition to all of those speakers, you'll notice we've got two separate amplifiers here on a custom bracket to mount them under the seat, out of the way, with all of your wiring already pre-installed. You've got a 1,000 watt and an 800 watt amplifier to give plenty of power to those subwoofers and all of those component speakers found throughout the Wrangler. You'll also notice you get a dedicated standalone digital sound processing unit that features a custom Wrangler specific tune to give you the best possible sound from this system when it's installed in your Wrangler. Now, speaking of that installation, you'll notice on the table in front of me, you get all of the different wiring harnesses you need to install this in your Jeep, making it an easy plug and play install. Everything from the T-harness that installs behind the factory radio to the additional harnesses, and even things like this fuse holder that mounts under the hood. You'll even get a replacement 12-volt accessory socket that relocates your port to inside the glove box, freeing up space on the dash for your new bass control knob for quick and easy adjustments on the fly when you're behind the wheel of your Wrangler. I even love the attention to detail here with the installation kit, including things like the tool to remove that factory 12-volt accessory socket, the template to drill the holes in your glove box, including a drill bit and the hole saw, as well as labeled hardware so you know exactly where everything needs to be installed. Now with that said, why don't we go ahead and push this out of the way so we can dive right into that installation. The very first thing we need to do to get started with our install is to go ahead and disconnect our negative terminals from the battery. We have one here on the battery. We also have the auxiliary negative over here on the fender. After I disconnect this with a 10mm wrench, I like to go ahead and tape up these terminals just so there's no chance they can come in contact with ground. This is also a great time to go ahead and fold your soft top back, or if your Wrangler is equipped with a hard top, it's going to make it a whole lot easier to complete the soundbar install if you go ahead and remove the hardtop from the vehicle at this point. To remove the overhead soundbar, we first need to remove all of the sport bar trim surrounding it on both the front and rear seat areas on the driver and passenger side of the vehicle. This trim is held in place with a series of T25 Torx screws on both the bottom and top side of the trim. The screws on the top side can be difficult to get to with the top in place, and that's why we suggest to either fold back your soft top or completely remove your hard top if your Jeep is equipped with one. After removing those screws, the trim panels are simply held in place with a series of clips, which could require just a little bit of pressure to remove them. Next, we'll remove the center portion of the trim at the top of the B-pillar. These are held in place with one additional T25 Torx screw and then a series of clips. Now we can move on to removing the dome light assembly. Using a panel pry tool, we can pull down to release the clips and then unplug and set the light aside. Now we can remove the center trim piece, again held in place with a series of screws along the front leading edge. With those out of the way, we can pull down on that panel to reveal the 6 10mm bolts that are holding the overhead soundbar in place. Start by disconnecting the electrical connection at the soundbar and then remove those 6 bolts. The overhead soundbar will still be held in place lightly with an alignment pin on each side that will require slight pressure to release it. Now at this point, with the factory soundbar removed, we can move on to installing the new Rockford Fosgate preloaded soundbar with those two 6.5-inch component speakers. Now, the installation is basically the reverse of the removal of the factory piece. Now there are these 2 alignment pins, one on each side, that do feature a small tab that is going to lock it into place. We'll go ahead and lift it up, aligning those tabs on each side. Push up slightly to lock it in place. And now we can resecure it with those factory bolts. And then we can move on to reinstalling all of the surrounding trim in the reverse order that we removed it, making sure not to forget to plug in that dome light when we install it. Next up, we'll get started by replacing the factory tweeters with the new Rockford Fosgate tweeter. Using a panel tool, go ahead and pry up on the tweeter cover grill. With that out of the way, we're going to be removing 2 screws that hold the tweeter in place. So you can use either a Phillips head or a 7mm socket to remove these screws. With them out of the way, lift the tweeter out of the dash and disconnect it. Now the new tweeter is simply going to drop right back in with that factory plug-and-play connection. Connect the tweeter, drop it in, aligning this notch in the tweeter adapter with the tab on top of the dash. Resecure it with those 2 screws, and for now, we're going to leave that grill cover off until we're finished with the rest of the dash installation. Now with that passenger side done, I can move on to getting the driver side tweeter in. Again, just simply connect that factory plug-and-play connection, feed the wiring down into the dash, aligning that tab. We can drop that tweeter right back in, and all that's left to do is secure it with those 2 factory screws. Now next up, we're going to be moving down to replacing the lower speakers in the dash. This is going to be the most intimidating part of this installation. While not necessarily difficult, we are going to be disassembling a lot of the dash components to get access to replace those factory speaker pods. So just go slow and take your time. The first step we need to do is go ahead and remove this lower panel under the steering wheel. It's simply held in place with some clips. We can grab it and set it aside. Next, we'll remove the climate control panel by grabbing it close to the steering wheel and pulling towards you to release the clips. With the panel pulled out, we can disconnect the 2 electrical connections on the back side of the panel and set it aside. Next, we'll remove 2 screws at the bottom of the radio trim. With the screws removed, lift at the bottom of the trim to release the clips, removing the trim from around the radio. Next, we have 4 screws securing the radio in the dash. With those removed, pull the radio straight towards us and disconnect all of the connections on the back side of the radio. Now we have 1 screw left at the top of the radio cavity, securing the top trim piece to the dash. We'll pull that screw out. Now, starting at the driver's side behind the steering wheel, pull that trim piece directly towards you to release the clips, removing that trim piece from the top of the dash. Now, if any of these clips are left in the dash when you remove it, that's okay. We'll go ahead and remove them with a pair of pliers. Bend those vampire teeth back down so we can reinstall those clips onto the trim panel and then set it aside to be reinstalled later. Next, we'll remove the center trim panel from the dash panel. There's 1 screw holding this in place. Protect this panel from damage by placing a soft cloth over the gear shift selector. With the screw removed, we can simply pull the panel towards us to release the clips, disconnect all of the electrical connections on the backside, and then set it aside for later. Next, we'll have 4 screws securing the trim around the gauge cluster. With those removed, grab that trim panel, pulling straight towards you to release the clips. We'll set that aside. Next, we need to remove the driver's lower kick panel. The first step to do this is to pull the panel, revealing the driver door wiring connector. With that out of the way, we can release the red locking tab, lift the lever to disconnect the driver's door wiring connection. There's 1 10mm nut hidden just to the side of that wiring connector. With that removed, now we can remove the floor liner from the vehicle, and we're going to pull the entire kick panel towards the center of the vehicle to release it from the clips, as well as using a panel tool down through the driver's door jamb to help release that trim panel, and then we can lift it out of the way and set it aside. Next, we have 7 screws to remove underneath the steering column, 2 on the steering column trim. With those pulled out of the way, we have 5 more screws on the trim surrounding the headlight control switch. With those 5 screws removed, we can now grab a panel tool to release the side panel, simply held in place with some clips. This is going to reveal 5 more screws. Starting at the top, we'll remove the top 4 screws. Now, the lowest screw on here is going to be pretty difficult to access because it is blocked by the door jamb. This is where a flexible head 7mm ratcheting wrench will really make your life a lot easier. Go ahead and remove the lowest screw underneath of the dash, along with this last remaining screw we revealed by pulling off that side panel. With all of the screws removed, we should now be able to lift that panel up out of the way, disconnecting the headlight controls panel on the back side before we set it aside. Next, we have a series of screws to remove along this lower dash support bar. We have 1 8mm screw at the top of the vertical bar that we'll remove first. Next, we have a 10mm screw at the bottom of that vertical bar, along with 3 other 10mm screws to remove. We can also remove the 7mm screw all the way to the outboard side of that horizontal support bar. Next, we'll remove the 3 screws securing the speaker pod into the dash. We have 1 on that support bar, along with 1 at the top and 1 that we can access through the side of the dash. With all of the screws removed, we can now remove that horizontal support bar by pulling it towards us and bending it down. That's going to give us the clearance to remove that speaker pod from the dash. Simply pull it out of the dash. We have 3 electrical connections on the backside to disconnect, 1 for the speaker itself and 2 for a module that's mounted on the backside of that speaker pod. We have a couple additional steps that we need to complete before we can move on to installing the new speaker here on the driver's side. We'll need to install some of the wiring in the dash, along with the amplifiers under the driver's seat, so that we can run all of that additional wiring and connect it to the DSP unit, which is going to be installed here in the cavity of the dash behind the driver's side speaker. So the next step for us here is to go ahead and remove the driver's side seat, removing the 4 bolts, securing it in place. We can rock the seat back, disconnect the electrical connections, and lift the seat out of the vehicle. Start by removing the 10mm nut on the ground post. Next, using a utility knife, we'll need to cut a small L-shaped slice into the factory carpet to reveal an additional mounting post. Remove the 10mm nut from this mounting post as well. Next, we can install the amplifiers on the pre-assembled mounting bracket by installing the 2 tabs over top of the studs and resecuring the stud underneath of the flap in the carpet with the factory 10mm nut. Next, we'll route the ground cable underneath of the amplifier mounting bracket, install it on top of the grounding post, and secure it in place with the factory nut. Next, we can route the subwoofer output leg of the harness towards the back of the Jeep by pulling it underneath of the amplifier mounting bracket and tucking it between the trim and the carpet on the driver's side door jamb. Continue tucking this wire underneath of the trim, routing it towards the back of the vehicle. You'll end up next to the rear seat in between the driver's side door and the end of the driver's side door jamb trim. Next, we can route the speaker level input and output legs of the harness up towards the dashboard. Start by tucking them underneath of the center console and continue feeding them between the console and the carpet until you get to the dashboard. Next, we'll route the power cable through the firewall. We can start by popping the clips to remove the trim cover over the wire routing path. Then we can install the red power lead into this routing tray, resecure the cover in place, and then continue routing it up towards the firewall. If your Jeep is equipped with an automatic transmission, you'll find a plug located on the firewall just to the outboard side of the brake booster. If your Jeep is a manual transmission, you will have to drill a hole through your firewall. After removing this cap in the firewall, we can feed the power cable through the hole and continue pulling the cable all the way out until the pre-installed replacement grommet can be seated into the hole in the firewall. Before we can install the rest of the wiring in the dash, this is a great time to complete the installation of our passenger side replacement speaker. Start by opening the glove box, pull up on the soft open arm on the inboard side and towards the center of the vehicle to release it. Then push up on the tab under the grab handle to allow the glove box to drop open so we can remove it and set it aside. Next, using a panel tool, pop off the trim cover on the outboard side of the passenger grab handle, revealing a 10mm bolt. Remove the 2 10mm bolts, securing the grab handle in place, and set it aside. Next, we can remove the 3 screws along the bottom edge of the glove box opening. Then, using a trim panel tool, remove the airbag trim panel. There are 2 additional screws hidden underneath of this panel. Next, we can remove the 4 screws along the top edge of the airbag panel. With those removed, using a 13mm socket with an extension, we can reach 2 bolts hidden on the bottom side of the airbag panel. Reach up through the glove box cavity to access these 2 bolts. The airbag assembly does not need to be unplugged or removed from the vehicle. We just need enough room to access the screws behind it. You'll find 1 screw below the air vent and 1 above the outboard air vent that we need to remove. Next, we can remove the outboard side trim panel to reveal the additional screws hidden underneath. Start by removing the 4 screws that you can easily access. The 5th lowest screw is partially covered by the door jamb. This is where a flexible head 7mm ratcheting wrench will make it a lot easier to remove this screw. We should now be able to pull the passenger side dashboard trim away from the dashboard, allowing us access to the screws that secure the passenger side speaker in place. 1 screw can easily be accessed from the side. There are 2 additional screws holding the speaker in place. A stubby Phillips head screwdriver can be helpful in removing the upper screw. With all the screws removed, we can now drop the speaker pod out from the bottom of the dashboard, disconnecting the wiring plug on the back side of the pod. The new speaker installs in the reverse of the removal. Remember to first plug in that wiring connection and then reinstall the 3 screws securing the speaker pod to the dashboard. With the speaker in place, we can reinstall all of the previous screws that we removed, resecuring the dash panel in place along with the airbag assembly and grab bar. We'll leave the glove box removed at this time to allow additional room for routing some wiring. Next, we're ready to install some of the wiring into the dash. We can start with our 12-volt accessory relocation harness. This harness features 2 legs that we're going to run from the center cavity in the dash out towards the glove box cavity. With both of those into the glove box, we can now find the matching connector for the backside of the 12-volt accessory socket and connect it to the new harness. Next, we can grab our T-harness. You can see that it features a matching connector, the same as the one designed to plug into the back of the factory radio. Connect the opposite end of this connector to the factory radio harness by aligning it and closing the lever to latch it into place. Next, we'll run one leg of this harness that's designed to plug into the CAN bus network port. This is going to feed from the radio cavity down towards the glove box cavity. With that pulled through, we can leave that hanging in the glove box for now. Next, we'll grab the two remaining legs of the harness. These are first going to be fed from the top radio cavity down to the lower center dashboard cavity. With both of them successfully pulled down, we can now feed them out towards underneath of the steering wheel. Now finally, the third harness that we need to route at this point is for our remote base level control knob. This is going to run right here from the lower center dash cavity outboard to underneath of the steering wheel. At this point, all of your wire harnesses should be routed so that they're left exposed underneath of the steering wheel here. It's time to go ahead and install the digital sound processing unit, and this is going to install up here into the cavity of the dashboard just behind the driver's side speaker, so closer to the firewall. But we need to make some of our wiring connections to the DSP before we can install it. So we're going to start by grabbing our remote base level control wire harness, plug this into the side of the unit. We also have our output harness that is going to send the amplified output signal back to all of our speakers. Plug right here. On the opposite side, we can plug in the input harness. We also have the vehicle side harness that plugs in. You want to ensure that this is set to a low input level before we install it. Now you'll also find a USB extension harness in the box. You want to connect this to the side of the DSP before we install it. And we're going to route this down here to the driver's side kick panel. And that's going to make it really easy for us. Should you have to do any updates in the future, you don't have to uninstall this unit from the dash. You can simply plug in this USB cable that will be accessible down here in the driver's footwell. And we also want to make sure that we're plugging in our remote turn on lead, the blue wire here with the bullet connector. Go ahead and connect that. And now at this point, it's a great idea to go ahead and clean up and zip tie some of this wiring. It's going to make for the install of this DSP unit up in the dash to be a little bit easier. So just go ahead and tuck all of your wiring up nice and neat close to the unit, and then we can use the holes provided on the bracket to zip tie them securely in place. With all of our wiring zip tied to the DSP, we're ready to install it up into the cavity in the dash using the 3 provided 10mm screws. If your Jeep came from the factory with the premium audio system, you'll first need to remove the amplifier that's mounted in the location that the DSP is meant to install. You'll also need one additional harness that's designed specifically for the premium audio system because you will not be reusing that amplifier. You'll plug these 2 connections into the wiring left in place in the dash, and the opposite side will plug in the wiring that's going to lead down to the amplifiers. Now, because our Jeep had the base level audio system, we don't need to worry about removing anything before we install the DSP, and we can simply make the connection from our T harness to the harness that we previously routed from the amplifiers up towards the dash. With the T-harness connection made to the amplifier lead, we can now raise the DSP up into the dash, tucking the wires neatly around the dash supports and securing the bracket in place with the 3 provided screws or the 3 factory screws if you removed the amplifier from your premium audio equipped Jeep. Route the USB cable down along the driver's side. We can tuck this wire next to the factory door electrical connector. It will be concealed when we later install the driver's kick panel trim. Before we can install the new speaker pod, we first need to transfer a module from the backside of the factory speaker pod over to the new pod. Using a 7mm socket, remove the 3 screws holding the module in place. Transfer the module over and resecure it with those factory screws. At this point, we can install the new Rockford Fosgate speaker and pod into the dash, making sure to plug in the electrical connection for the speaker on the backside, along with the 2 connectors into the module secured on the backside of the speaker pod. Secure the entire thing in place with the 3 screws we removed earlier. Now we can reassemble the majority of the dash at this point in the reverse order of removal, resecuring all of the dash structural supports, followed by the headlight trim and surround. Before we move farther, this is a great time to install the driver's kick panel trim, setting it into place and pulling it towards the outside of the vehicle to resecure it with clips. Don't forget to resecure it with that single 10mm nut that we removed earlier. Next, we can reinstall the driver's seat, set it in place in the vehicle, and lower it back so that we can access the electrical connections on the underside of the seat. Make sure to reconnect the one large connector as well as the smaller yellow connector. With both of those made, we can now lower the seat in place and secure it with the 4 T50 Torx bolts. Next, we can finish some of the dash reassembly by reinstalling the gauge cluster trim and surround, snapping it into place and securing it with the 4 factory screws. We can reinstall the dash top trim by simply snapping it back into place and securing it with the single screw above the radio cavity. Reconnect all of the wiring connections on the backside of the radio so that we can set it back into the dash cavity and secure it with the 4 factory screws, followed by the radio surround trim, which simply snaps into place and is held with 2 screws on the bottom side. And next up, we can reinstall the tweeter grille covers by simply setting them in place and pushing down to secure them with the clips. Before we can reinstall the lower center dash trim panel, we first need to remove the 12-volt accessory port. We're going to be doing that so that we can install the new base level control knob. To do so, we're going to be using the 12-volt accessory port removal tool that's included with the kit out of the box. First, open up the 12-volt accessory port and then insert the T-shaped tool down, aligning it with the 2 tabs inside of the socket. Once it's locked into place, we can now pull the inside of the accessory socket out. With the insert removed, we can now flip it over and depress the tabs on the backside to remove the rest of the accessory port. From here, we can set this aside as we'll not be reusing it. Grab the remote base level adjustment knob and an 11mm socket. We need to first start by removing the nut found on the adjustment knob. You shouldn't actually need a tool. A simple socket itself should be plenty of leverage to get that nut off of the adjustment knob. With the nut removed, we can install the knob from the back side of the panel, aligning this alignment tab with the notch on the panel. Now we'll reinstall the outer portion of the bezel, which also features an alignment peg. Once you have that set in place, we can reinstall the nut to secure it. Again, using that 11mm socket. Finger tight is plenty. We don't want to over tighten this and crack the plastic adjustment. Now finally, we can install the knob by aligning the mark on the knob itself with the small mark at about the 7 o'clock mark there on the base. Simply line that up and push it into place. And you'll notice, because of the magnets on the knob itself, when we adjust the base level, well, that Rockford Fosgate logo is always going to stay right side up. I like that attention to detail. Now we're ready to reinstall the lower dash panel back into place, making sure that you reattach all of the electrical connections on the backside of the panel, in addition to the new remote base control knob connection. With that panel in place, we can move on to installing the climate control panel by simply plugging in the 2 factory wiring connections on the backside of the panel and snapping it back into the dash. Next, we'll reinstall the lower knee panel below the steering column by simply lining it up and snapping it into place. Before we can reinstall the glove box, we first need to install the new 12-volt accessory socket inside of the glove box. We'll use the included template to locate the 4 holes that we need to drill. Using the provided bit included in the kit, drill through the template in the 4 locations. With the holes drilled, you can compare the new 12-volt accessory socket mounting bracket to locate which holes will be used to mount the bracket on the inside of the glove box. The 4th hole, closest to the lower backside of the glove box, needs to be enlarged as a wire pass-through. We're going to be using the included hole saw to enlarge that 4th hole. The 12-volt accessory socket will install inside the glove box by first feeding the wire harness through the hole that we just drilled, and then we'll secure the accessory socket and the mounting bracket in place with the 3 provided button head screws. With everything secure, we're ready to install the glove box into the vehicle. The accessory socket relocation harness features 2 output legs. Rockford Fosgate has provided you an extra 12-volt output for an additional aftermarket accessory if you'd like to install one. Using the included pigtail, we can plug it into one leg of the harness. It features positive and negative outputs with pre-installed butt connectors. I'm going to remove the pigtail since we're not using it. At this point, we can connect the CAN bus connector featuring the white and black pass-through plugs. Now, that black pass-through plug is in case your star connector is completely full. This white plug will simply install into the green star connector in any of the open locations. If they're already all filled up, simply unplug any one of the factory connections and plug it into that black pass-through port. Grab the glove box and the new accessory socket wire harness and plug it into the other leg of the harness. Now we can simply tuck the wiring up into the dash and reinstall the glove box in the reverse of the removal. To begin installing the subwoofers in the rear cargo area, we first need to remove the floor by pulling towards the rear of the vehicle to release it. Then we can remove the floor trim and the 3 cargo tie-down points on each side of the vehicle. Using a panel tool, pop the cover off of the tie-down points, and using a T40 Torx bit, we can loosen and remove each one of the tie-downs, finally lifting the floor trim out of the way. Repeat this on the driver's side as well. We'll begin installing the passenger side subwoofer first, setting it into the cargo area. Then we can lift on the bottom of the subwoofer to slip the metal U-bracket on the backside of the subwoofer box underneath of the top edge of the body of the Jeep. As we rotate the subwoofer down, this bracket will engage with the body tub, locking the subwoofer box into place as we align the bottom tab with the 3 mounting locations for the cargo tie-down points. Route the wiring over towards the driver's side of the Jeep, tucking it underneath the carpet just behind the rear seat. We'll secure the passenger side subwoofer in place by reinstalling the floor trim along with the 3 passenger side cargo tie-downs. The driver's side subwoofer will install just the same as the passenger side. Start by setting the subwoofer into the cargo area, then lifting the bottom towards the center of the vehicle to slip the metal U-bracket under the top edge of the body of the Jeep. Rotate the bottom of the subwoofer down, aligning the bottom mounting bracket with the 3 holes in the floor for the cargo tie-downs. Reinstall the floor trim along with the 3 cargo tie-down points. At this point, we're ready to make our subwoofer wiring connections. Using the leg of the harness that we previously routed to the rear seat area, we can lift up the carpet over the rear wheel well and feed that wire connection towards the driver's side rear subwoofer. Then we can make our respective connections for both the driver's side and the passenger side subwoofer into the Y harness. Spend just a few minutes neatly tucking the wiring underneath of the carpet in this area so that you're left with a clean, professional looking install with no visible wires when you're finished. You can now reinstall the cargo area floor by setting it in place and sliding it forward to engage the locking tabs. If you were previously using a rear cargo liner like our Quadratec Ultimate cargo liner, it can be reused with a little bit of custom trimming around the base of both the driver and passenger side subwoofers. The last part of our install is to finish up our main power cable harness. We'll start at the brake booster in the engine bay where we left this cable earlier during the install. Feed the power cable behind the coolant tank reservoir, running it towards the passenger side next to the battery. Before we can install the fuse holder, we first need to remove the cover, and using a 4mm Allen wrench or Allen socket, remove the set screw. We need to remove the insert as well as the piece of plastic that's installed from the factory to prevent the set screw from falling out. With the plastic removed, we can reinstall the insert into the fuse holder, securing it in place with the set screw. Install the power cable through the bracket and into the fuse holder, ensuring that the power cable is fully seated in place into the fuse holder. Secure it by tightening the 4mm set screw. This is also a great time to ensure that the set screw on the opposite side of the fuse holder is tight as well. Remove the two 10mm nuts found on the top pinch seam at the back of the engine bay. Install the fuse holder bracket on top of the studs and secure it in place. Using the included zip tie edge clips, push 3 of them along the same pinch seam running from the passenger to the driver's side of the engine bay, and secure the power cable with zip ties to the edge clips. Continue pulling the power cable towards the driver's side of the vehicle, securing the excess cable around the brake booster with the included zip ties. At this point, we're ready to make our power connection to the positive terminal of the battery. Remove the 11mm nut on the positive terminal, install the power cable, and secure it in place. Now finally, we can reconnect all of the negative cables that we removed before we began the install, starting at the inside of the passenger side fender, as well as the negative terminal on top of the battery. With our install complete, it's time to allow the new Rockford Fosgate system to reprogram some of the settings in our Wrangler. Now, if your vehicle came from the factory with the premium audio system, it's important to go ahead and lock the Jeep and take the key away from the vehicle. So if you're doing this install in your garage or driveway, you're gonna wanna take the key into your house and allow the Jeep to go to sleep and sit for 20 minutes before you come back to it. Now, if your Jeep came from the factory with the base audio system like our Wrangler did, at this point, all we have to do is lock and unlock the Wrangler. We'll go ahead and hop in the vehicle. At this point, we can hit the start-stop button twice without our foot on the brake. This will put the Jeep into run mode. Once you allow the system to cycle, grab the emergency brake, turn it off, back on, off, back on, and you'll hear one honk. At this point, we need to activate the left turn signal. You're going to hear another honk. Wait for a moment, and we'll hear another honk twice. Now, you'll notice the radio is going to go to sleep. It's actually going to power cycle twice. This is the Maestro module and the Rockford Fosgate system changing the output level of your factory radio to a low level output. Now, once the radio has fully power cycled twice, we can deactivate the turn signal, turn the ignition off, open and close the door to shut everything down. At this point, it's time to go ahead and turn on the ignition to the accessory position so that we can test out our new install. Now, obviously, any sound test that I do here just isn't going to translate through your laptop or your cell phone speakers that you're watching this video on. You just have to trust me that the 1,800 watts of power that we just installed this Jeep are sure to blow the top and doors off and give you tons of listening enjoyment anytime you're here behind the wheel of your Wrangler. Now, with everything installed, I love just how much it looks like it was all meant to be there right from the factory. Even down to the touch and feel of the bass control knob here on the dash. It matches all of the other knobs perfectly, and it gives you quick and easy access to crank up that bass when you want it, or
turn it down when you want your music just a little bit more mellow. With those two slim 12-inch subwoofers in the cargo area in the back of the Jeep, we really didn't even lose that much cargo area at all. Of course, we've also got those two 6.5-inch components in that completely new overhead soundbar in the back, as well as two 6.5-inch components in the dash, and those new tweeters up top. You're sure to be able to hear your music no matter what kind of road noise you've got going on outside of your Wrangler. Now, if you want to get more information or to purchase a Rockford Fosgate complete audio kit for your 2018 to 2023 four-door Jeep Wrangler JL, you can click that info button to head over to quadratech.com. Of course, if you have any comments or questions about the system or how to get it installed, you can always do this for me down in the comment section below, or simply head over to quadratech.com. As always, if you haven't already, make sure you do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button if you like today's video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well as the notification icon so be sure to catch all of our latest videos. Till next time, I'm Rob. I'll see you out on the trail.